ICQ Podcast episode 271, Network Radio. Well, hello fellow Amateur Radio enthusiasts and welcome to this, our 221st episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by the other Martin, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Matthew, Mike 0 November Juliet X-Ray, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature on network radio. Well, as always, we'd like to thank our donors who like the show and show their love for the show by donating and keeping the show over free, and it's our monthly and subscription donors that keep donating and helping us pay our way, so we greatly appreciate your input. To help out, all you need to do is visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you can send our way is always greatly appreciated. Well, now we join Martin, Matthew, Ed and Martin to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news, including RF direction robots and crickets, frogs and ham radio. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 271 of the ICQ podcast, and this episode's News Roundtable. Tonight I got Mr. Martin Rothwell M0SGL.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm Martin, and I'll say Christopher's not with us tonight, so
we can run riot, yes.
Yeah, we can run riot, but I think Matthew will try and keep us under control, won't you, Matthew? Mr. Matthew Nassau, M0NJX.
Oh, thank you. So I know it's been a long time since I've been back on the show, but you did remember my call sign. Fantastic. Yes, and I will keep everyone in moderation.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember your call sign, or it's the fact that it's in your Skype ID.
Or the fact that he's got it written on the screen in front of him.
That's what I mean.
Every little part of the show, keep nudging.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
And we also have Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5 LP. Hi, Ed.
Hi, here's staring as usual.
No problems. We're all a little bit tired tonight, so hopefully it won't sound too bad, guys. Let's see what we can do. Starting off, I kind of like the first news story. It's not really amateur radio as such, but I thought it was good. Building an RF direction finding robot, and they were using the RTL SDR dongle thing, from what I can see. Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice little story, actually, but it's not directly amateur radio, except that, of course, it's using like around 430 megs. The license-free area, and they've actually built, they're building a robot that has two antennas, works out the time difference between the arrival and it says here pseudo Doppler shift direction finding techniques, and the idea is the robot should be able to follow or find an RF source on like 430 megahertz beacon transmitter. And it's based around a hummingbird, which is like high-powered version of a Raspberry Pi, I think. And it's all very interesting. It's not directly amateur radio, but it's interesting what you can do with the little $20 or £20 RTL STR dongle.
Yeah, certainly is. So, Martin, what do you think? 400 watts or my 1.5 kilowatts in the States? That would give it screwed up, wouldn't it?
That'd probably upset it, or it would go very, very fast in the direction of your house. I mean, we still talked about being able to run 400 watts on the frequency that our car key fobs will operate on, and still being allowed to use that. Ironically, strange, huh? I like this. It's an interesting little gadget. I think it's a great thing to demonstrate. When we had the guy come into the club to do, I think it was an antenna circus, and he demonstrated polarization of signals and things like that. This again is another kind of thing that should be like a demo thing that can show you what you can do and what you can do with relatively simple components. Specifically if you've got someone who's perhaps an electronics kind of person that's thinking about getting into the hobby, and well, what can you do? Here, have a look at this. This is just another example of what you can do, aside from obviously amateur radio being able to communicate with people. But building little gizmos like this, great. I didn't look. Does it say what the range on this thing is? Are we talking about something that's going like 10 feet across the room, or are we talking about something that can walk across a field or something like that, or can steer itself across a field towards it?
I looked at the I guess the link to the original site where the story unfolded, and there's a video showing this thing going across a fairly large car park. I mean,
Okay.
a couple 100 meters one way, like a big rectangular shape. So it's definitely a non-trivial toy. I mean, I think it's fantastic. I mean, looking at the I said this original site, I think it's, maybe we'll link it in the show notes, kind of describes what it is, kind of a solution diagram as to how all the things plug into the Hummingbird. And as you said, it's just components. You're taking an Arduino Nano, you're taking off-the-shelf GPS antenna, you're taking board, and some clever software, and a guy that thinks he can think through the problem.
Well, I guess the technology is there because you've always got that. You bear in mind that police have got trackers in their car. They've got four antennas. They become part of a directional array, and then they effectively light up lights inside the car saying the stolen vehicle is in this direction. I suppose you're applying the same kind of technology into this small little device. Obviously compressing it a lot more with two antennas, and then rather than lighting up lights, you're saying drive in this direction. So it's a nice little project. This, I quite like this.
Yeah, and it's using radio. Radio waves at least.
Yeah,
and that's
real radio.
Real radio. That's sexy.
Yeah, so I think we're all in agreement. This is electronics and radio within electronics, and something that you can't fail to be interested. Robotics, RF, what more? So that's a good one. Moving on, there's a new HF Manager's Handbook available for 2018. And we kind of looked at this, but it's quite hard reading, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah, so I didn't even know this thing existed. I didn't even know really the role of HF managers as such, but I know I went to the site and had a look. It's a fairly dense document summarizing and defining a lot of terms and sort of mutually agreed concepts, and some of the things are quite interesting. But I think it's not a general read for someone maybe who's interested in HF operation. Like I'm in the UK, I'll revert to my band plan from my local organizing body, RSGB, and have my fun that way. But it's interesting to see the I feel like the framework of how different countries can kind of come together under a common region, in this case, Region 1, to harmonize and agree on definitions, terminology. I mean, they go into quite a lot of detail. They go right down into things like defining Morse code speeds and making sure that everyone uses the word Paris as the definition of a 50-bit keyword. Or even it goes into describing the minimum and maximum sizes of QSL cards, which I thought was pretty cool.
What?
So it's there. It's there.
Someone has way too much time. No. They need to seriously get out, get an internet connection, get a girlfriend. Seriously,
just get on the air.
Yeah, do something slightly more productive.
So if you have any small questions about the nuances of operating below 30 megahertz, then it's probably in this document.
Yes, certainly. And go on, Martin. You were getting quite excited there.
I'm standing in for Leslie. This is it, isn't it? I mean, my initial question is like HF managers. Who are these people? What are they managing? Who appoints them? What exactly do they do? Okay, we know what they do. They're dictating the size of QSL cards, but why? I'm not really sure what you would want to do that. I know we have band plans. We have the RSGB give us a band plan for the UK. Other countries, bodies give them a band plan. In the UK, it's a gentleman's agreement. In other countries, I think the States, I think Ed mentioned Germany. I think it's this is what you will use in this part of the band. But other than that, why? What are these people doing? And do they have just jurisdiction over everyone? And, who actually appoints them? Do we vote for them? Have I missed something?
I think it's done by at the ITU level, Martin, and each country has the input into Region 1. There are a lot of things in here, and they're suggestions. their suggestions. They're not set in stone.
But things like the size of a QSL card. I mean, okay, pretty much every QSL card I've received is all the same, presumably because they're just easy to print like that, and the QSL companies print them that size. But if I've received others that are different sizes, why does this matter?
I would suggest is that your local society are paying the postage, so the weight of, the size of, when the authority in your country parcels them up and sends them to another country, there's a set cost for it, I would imagine.
I guess so. I suppose maybe it's if they're keeping it in some kind of filing system at the bureau's end, then maybe that's where the difference is.
Yeah, I think so. But there's more to it than that. Ed, you've had a look at this as well. There's recommendations on S points, isn't there, and other sorts of things in here.
Yeah, just coming back to Martin R's question about why is the size of a QSL card important. Mm-hmm. You're probably too young to remember the days of card sorters. Okay, they sorted cards with punched holes in, but there is the equivalent now.
You talk about the Hollerith punch cards.
Yeah, but probably just the IBM punch cards more.
Right, okay.
Which is what it was, but where it came from. But nowadays, there are actual card sorters for sorting like letters and postcards and things like that you can you print a small code on them when you receive them, and then you can put them through the sorters out and automatically sort out the groups. For instance, in the UK, you might want to sort out all the Northern Welsh cards. And send them off to the Welsh manager to do something with them. If the cards are different sizes, they won't fit the sorter. So I suspect that's the reason for the standardised size, which appears to be something like an old 6x4 photograph that we had years and years ago, paper photograph. But I think that's the reasoning for the size. There's a limit.
It's interesting, actually, because I've got my QSL cards in a little pile on my desk. I've looked at them. All of them, bar one, are the standard like size, and they are all perfectly sized. The other one, I guess, is a centimetre all round bigger.
Yeah,
and it looks like he's printed it himself on his home printer. Yeah,
that could well be. And the other thing you mentioned as well was it could very well be that the people printing these cards also like to have a standard size, because then you can rule off however many is in a big sheet of glossy paper and use an automatic guillotine to put the right size. So
maybe if you're printing on A3 or something like that, you can get X per page. Yeah,
whatever size it happens to be for the printing press or the whatever it is nowadays. So but I mean, I think this manual, by the way, it's not ITU, it's IARU. So it's the body above the RSGB, the DARC, the FCC, and so on. In this case, Region 1. Sorry, not the FCC, ARRL. So it's the one above the national bodies that represents the national bodies to the ITU, who are the top of the pile as regards regulations and laws about radio use across the world. And the HF managers, I think, are the people then that attend the meetings like the WRC meetings, like the IARU meetings, where they actually go along and say, guys, we'd actually like to have perhaps another 0.5 megabyte on 70 megahertz across the Region 1. We'd like to be able to run more power on some microwave band or whatever, and give the reasons and then present the reasons why the ITU should allow us to do that. So I think that's the HF manager's role. This particular document is almost like an operations manual. And I was going through it. I also had never read it before, even though I found I've got an earlier version of the copy on my hard disk. So at some point I downloaded it. But it's been built up, it says in the front of it, from all the discussions in the IARU Region 1 meetings over the last, since 1989, so over a long time. And, the majority of them are suggestions. The band plans in there are the ones that a lot of countries just take per se and don't even change them for their own countries, even though they can do. And again, it's generally an operations manual. The bits in there that are actually quite interesting to read, but it's quite a big document. But any of the listeners who want to, the link to it, of course, is in the show notes.
Certainly are, Ed, and thanks for giving me. I got it wrong with saying ITU. You're dead right. It's IARU. So I got it wrong there, Ed, but thanks for correcting us on that one. Well, I'd suggest this is not a document that you sit and read cover to cover, but you dip in if you want to find out interesting bits and pieces about our hobby and go from there. Moving on to our next story, it's entitled Crickets, Frogs and Ham Radio. And I think this is absolutely brilliant. It's youngsters in Australia being able to go out, do some field work. You know, they're looking at various bits and pieces. They're going to do some radio. They're going to build things. Fantastic. Martin, we never did this at school, did we?
Oh, geez, no. I mean, when I was at school, I think I was in secondary school. So I guess I'd have been aged about 12 or 13, and we built a fuse tester, which included etching our printed circuit board, which was effectively 2 or 4 lines that you had to draw on the board with a little sort of effectively a bone shape that you could wire a 9-volt battery holder onto one, an LED on the other, and you put a resistor in on one side, and then the equivalent of your fuse holder in the other. And that was what we had to make. And the soldering irons that we used were little Antex irons, and the tips nowadays, I know that the tips had passed their best probably 20 years prior in the fact they had holes in the end of them. At the time, I just thought I was really, really bad at soldering and was never going to get the hang of it. This sort of thing, though, I'd have loved to have done something like this. It's if you've got the right tools to do it, if you're going to get someone with the bug and make them, if you excuse the pun, crickets and things like that. But if you're going to get someone the radio bug or the building bug for electronics, this is the kind of thing that will do it. If it's done properly, if it's done right, and you're given decent tools with the tips that are complete, then yeah, brilliant, go for it.
Yeah, I agree totally with you. But Matt, you've really got the bug since you've joined the hobby. I know you've done lots of things prior, but you've really got the bug in doing all sorts of things, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean that's for me. That's the one part of the hobby which I enjoy, which is making stuff. CW filters, and making my own boards, and playing around with electronics. I learn stuff. I like to do that. Life is a journey. You're learning stuff. And I'm just thinking, I was with my son the other day, and he has some summer school, an optional class to go to summer school, and my wife was explaining what the lesson was going to be, and there was going to be chemistry, practical chemistry class, there was going to be a sports class, then there was going to be an electronics class, and I said, "Hey, that's fantastic! You should go. You should really go." And he went, "Nah, I want to go swimming." And I felt deflated, and I felt like, how do I encourage my son to kind of pick up and find a passion that I had? But and it's great to see that a club, an amateur radio club, is trying to catch those little that younger generation into taking part in it, and making it fun. Don't make them sit in front of a square board and it makes a flashing LED. Make it into something that they can have fun with. It sounds like a solar powered grasshopper will do the trick.
Certainly does, doesn't it? Ed, I mean, this is an Australian story, and I know you spent some time in Australia. You any comments on this one? Did you know the club at all?
No, the club's actually in Bendigo in Victoria, which would be like the equivalent from where I lived to somebody in Oslo. So quite a way away. But no, just to point out the fact, this is not in a school or anything. It's not part of a school thing. It's actually a summer activity that's been put on by the Bendigo Amateur Radio and Electronics Society for anybody that wants to come along, free of charge. And I don't know if they're actually paid for the kits, but in any case, if they did pay for it, they wouldn't be paying that much. And they had different kits depending on the age. So they had kits that the people could make up to make a cricket, a frog, or a grasshopper. I think the grasshopper was the most complex one to build, and that was then for the older people, older children. And I don't know if it's the cricket or the frog was the simplest one, but they'd actually, they're doing this so that the people, the children actually go away with something in their hand. And I think that's very, very important. They come in, they learn about soldering, they learn about assembling things. They're helped to make it work, to fix any problems, and they go home with something that they have built, and it bounces around, and yeah, okay, so at some point somebody's going to stand on it or whatever, but the memory is there. Hey, I built that, and that's the sort of thing that can spark interest. So
that's it. If it gets them to take home, that's the main thing, though, isn't it? If you're going to go there and you're going to do something, yeah, I did that. If you go home, and if you're a kid, you can go home. Hey, look, Mum, I built this. That's different.
Or his mate down the road. Look what I built, and
then his mate gets interested.
Yeah, they just, I wonder if I can get into that next year, or is it running still, or whatever, And the CQ Scotland do something very similar, actually. So there's a few radio clubs around the place that do this kind of thing to get kids involved in, at least in electronics, if not necessarily radio, but in electronics. And my hats off to the Bendigo group there at doing a blooming good job.
Absolutely, I'd second that. But and just interestingly, it is Bendigo Amateur Radio and Electronics Club. And a thought came to me, how many amateur radio and electronics clubs are there typically? I mean, mostly they're radio societies, or we all know electronics is a central part of the radio experience, but how accessible are we making the path that might bring people into the hobby by calling ourselves just a radio society or a radio club, and not maybe a more wider electronics club, for example?
Yeah, well, the Bendigo group has been around for years upon years upon years, and I think it's historically called itself that. It's not that they've merged with the Maker group or anything. I think they were always called the Bendigo Amateur Radio and Electronics Club since, I don't know when they were formed, 1950s, perhaps.
Okay. So it's
I mean, it's a good point, though. I mean, as soon as you say it's an amateur radio club, you think, well, it's radio and nothing else. But this amateur radio hobby of ours definitely has electronics in it. It has map reading in it. It has hiking in it. It has whatever else you want in there in it. It's software design in it. But we don't market that, do we?
We don't market lots of things in our hobby, which obviously would improve. But I know the RSGB have been talking to maker groups, and we've been, as a hobby, been trying to get maker groups involved. And our first news story with the robot was a maker group doing something. So it's kind of, we are sort of trying to work with them. But this is just great. I think it's a brilliant news story. I'd love to have been involved with this when I was a youngster. I really would have done. And, one of the things that I'm really disappointed now is, now I'm a lot older, is the electronics kit I had one Christmas that I got. I'd have been about 14 at the time. The Philips electronics kit, where it was like a pegboard and you connected the wires and the components on it. And
I had one of those.
Yeah.
Not a Philips one. I had a realistic one.
All right. I had
Tandy.
Yeah. And mine's gone. It went years ago, and I don't know what happened to it.
Haven't we got one at the club? Didn't someone put like 9 volts over a 1 volt LED and it went bang?
Yes, one of our youngsters learnt very quickly that you have to put a limiting resistor on an LED. But
it did not go with a bang, though.
Yeah.
But if you want one of these kits, Martin, I'm sure if we contacted them, they'd send you one.
No, I'll get one at some point in time. I'll find one at some point in time, because I think it's fun. But I'm not desperate. I'm not doing so many other things. But I kind of feel that those were the days when you could actually touch a transistor. You could actually touch a resistor, one thing and another. Unlike
you still can. You just touch a lot more of them at the same time.
Yeah, true.
So blooming small.
Yeah. But all in all, I think that was a really good one. Moving on, free online amateur radio foundation training. And our friends down at Essex Hams, in particular Pete Sipple, has been doing a lot of work on this. And I think, in fairness, they really need a good shout out. What do you think, Martin?
I'll definitely give Pete a shout out. Because I know that they would do the same for us. And full details for that, essexham.co.uk/train/foundation-online. So anybody wanting to, that is listening to the podcast, that thinking, how can I get into doing the license? That's a good place to start. Otherwise, just check out essexham.co.uk, and I'm sure you'll find the link from the front page there. Anything that helps people get their license is good. I know when I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but when I was trying to get licensed, it was a real struggle. I'm one of these people. You can, I like to go to places. I like to be shown stuff to understand it. So I ended up driving from my home in southwest London. I drove to Chelmsford for the foundation and the intermediate course, and I drove to Reading for the advanced. Had there been something like this available at the time, I'd have probably gone through this. Now, okay, I would still probably had questions, but at least then, if you've got an online course that you can go on there, you can go through the things on there rather than just reading the book. You're definitely heading in the right direction. And obviously then you can go and ask questions later like, what does this mean? I haven't quite got this. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really, really useful stuff on the SXM webpage. And I know Pete and people there do a lot to promote the hobby and to try and get more people in. So yeah, this can only be a good thing. And anyone listening, go check it out if you're interested in doing your foundation exam and getting on the air.
I would say, yeah. I mean, I came into the hobby, 2013, and I went to my local club, happened to be Sutton and Cheam, and it was the traditional way of sitting down in a classroom and going through it, and whiteboard ideas, discuss it, and you sit the test. When I went into the advanced course, the full license in the UK, I did that through a remote distance learning course with the Bath group, which I think is well known in the UK for full license holders. And, the online videos, the content was there. You still had tutorials. You still had people to talk to and share ideas. And looking at the foundation online course from Essex Ham, it's the same methodology. It's the same idea of you could be at your house in your own laptop in your own time, looking at the material, aligning it with the textbook for the foundation license, doing online quizzes. If you have a question, send a question to your colleague, maybe meet up for a tutorial somewhere local. All of that stuff, that support is still there while giving you the chance to not have to travel to Chelmsford or, Reading or local places that you may not be lucky enough to have close by. So it looks fantastic. And to be fair to them, they've been doing it for a couple of years, it looks like, and really impressive numbers. I mean, I think on their current website, they've over 1,000 people have enrolled for this in the past, 3 or 4 years, which I think is fantastic. The pass rate from the mocks, so the sense of completion for the students, is over 86%. So again, a big thumbs up. Fantastic job, guys. You are helping to support our fantastic hobby. Well done.
Yeah, I really think it's good. Ed, when you did yours and I did mine, there was no 3-tier license system. We went straight to the RAE, didn't we? So, what do you think?
Yeah, there was no multiple choice either. It was at my time. It was actually write a page or something as an answer and draw the circuit diagrams.
Thank heavens for multiple choice.
Yeah, and I want to point out here though is this is the UK Foundation license. Similar system exists in Australia, but it's one where you have to learn the logic, if you like, or learn the rules of the various subjects. It's not one where the questions and answers are published, as in the US and some other countries. So you actually have to get an understanding. And I think the fact if you can do it online, and if you don't understand something, you can go back and do it again and again and do mock tests until you're ready, is actually a very positive thing. In addition to that, you will actually still have to drive somewhere because you have to do the practical tests that go with this written test. And the actual test itself, I believe the test itself is now available from the RSGB online. From Ofcom, on the RSGB on behalf of Ofcom. For all 3 levels, I believe now they've started doing that, but you still have to go to an examination centre even to do that online. So we're talking about purely training here, but with mock exams, you'll get confidence and you'll know when you're ready to then go and do a real test. So, yeah, Essex Hams, good job again, guys. They keep coming up with good ideas. They've been working at it for several years, and thank you.
Yeah, I agree 100% with all you guys, what you said, and great work, guys. And as I say, especially Pete, who I think does a lot of driving that forward. But there are many, many people there at Essex Hams that are involved in all sorts of things for the hobby, and training being one of them. Well, our last news story, this could run and run and run, so I might have to cap it at some point in time. We were talking about electronic waste is a growing challenge now. What can we do to stop this and to help it? There's talking about 45 million metric tons of electronic waste, that's e-waste, as produced in 2016. So it's only going up. Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking billions and billions of euros here. And as we discussed it, as we said beforehand, this is all products that, your modern products with the modern electronics and the surface mount components in them, where actually recycling them or repairing them become not cost efficient, and so they're just all getting thrown out. Recycling them, if they go to the correct recycling centres, certain things like the valuable metals can be removed. But in general, we're just not doing enough of it. And I won't steal his thunder, but I think it was it Martin that said that he had an idea of how this might be addressed? Anyway, we'll leave it to whoever it was to come up with that. I'm not going to steal your thunder because I think it was a good idea. But in general, I think it's time to be concerned, guys, before we end up, buried under our own rubbish.
Yeah, okay, Ed, and I get that one. Martin, what do you think?
I mean, 45 million metric tons, that's a lot. If you were to put that into the size of, however many buildings, I think I'd be interested to see how much that is. I mean, you have to, there's part of me that wonders, like, there's only a certain amount of mass on the world. Where is this all coming from? We've got 45 million tons here, then that must have come from somewhere. I know stuff grows, but not all this stuff does. We are, okay, we all want small and light. We don't want big clunky materials anymore. I totally get that. Some manufacturers are heading in the right direction. A lot of mobile phones nowadays are not supplied with chargers anymore. I don't know if that's mobile phones or whether that's just certain phone providers. In fact, they will sell it with a USB cable. But how many USB chargers have we all got at home? And in fact, some phones I think don't even come with said USB cable because it's an industry standard cable. Well, all except one manufacturer who think that their brand should be industry standard. News for you, but I'm not going to mention them. So we're sort of heading in the right direction with some of them, but yeah, that's a hell of a lot. What I'd like to see is, can the manufacturers not be pushed to make these devices more environmentally friendly? I know that it's difficult to recycle a lot of the components because they're surface mount or because there's less materials on the board. Perhaps it's not worth their while. But, can the powers that be not force the manufacturers, say, actually, come on, guys, this is how much the waste is that you're producing. You now need to, effectively pay for the waste, or you're going to have to start developing products that don't create so much waste.
Yeah, I agree on that. And we talked about waste recycling as well earlier. Matthew, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, just helping people visualize what is it, 45 million tons? That's in 2016. So 45 million metric tons. That's in 1 year, 365 days.
What was 2017? Yeah, what was the rest?
Well, and there's some helpful visualization tools here. Imagine, apparently, I take it for granted that this is true. It's equivalent to 9 Great Pyramids of Giza. So you imagine 9 piles of garbage or recycled e-waste sitting there, old broken DVDs and TVs and radios and I guess everything else that's out there. It's a staggering number. And it's because we are in a in a generation where things are getting faster, cheaper, lighter, easier, right? We're consuming new things at an ever faster rate. The shelf life of a mobile phone is it a year? Is it 12 months? Probably.
Well, the contracts are generally for 2 years.
Okay.
My phone's come out to 2 years and still works pretty well at the moment.
It used to be you buy a TV and you got it repaired. Now you buy a TV and a couple years down the road, you don't want to get it repaired because it's hard or it's too expensive, because the relative cost of buying a new one is so reasonably close to the repair cost. It's and I think let's face it, in the hobby, amateur radio, let's bring it back to the radio. We see these kinds of changes. 50 years ago, people were using surplus Army military radios. They were, tangible things. People were building a lot of things. They were simpler, more simple at the time. And now we've got touchscreen, full color SDR radios, which need a lot of electronics, smart chips, which are being mass produced, and it's all very fantastic, and the functionality's there. That's not a bad thing, right? So I think that the evolution of products and phones and TVs is going forward. That's good. I think what we need to do is adjust how we consume them and how we expect to have an end of life process and accept that we should recycle these things. I mean, I think some of the numbers, as you said, the Global E-Waste Monitor, which is the report that the ITU came up with in conjunction with a few other organizations, puts a number of 55 billion euros on the value of the raw materials in that pile of garbage. With 55 billion euros, that's staggering. Even if it costs you 30 or 40 billion to extract them and recycle them and then be able to resell them, that's still 10 billion euros globally. That's a sizable market, no matter how you look at it. I think we should put, like Coke bottles or anything that's recycled, we should put a deposit on the end of a product so that your TV set is worth $10 to you if you take it back to the store. Some stores do that. They have trade-in policies and so forth. So maybe that's a way to incentivize people to look after the thing they don't want at the end of its life. I don't know, but staggering, and it's only going to get bigger. It's only going to get bigger. So, I'm looking just across the microphone here on my desk, and I can see a desoldering gun. I bought this last year because when I make my little circuits, I curse myself and I realize they don't work. So I want to pull them apart, but not damage the board. So I treated myself to a desoldering station. And I tell you, if I realized that amount of money, if I could make that money pay for me, I'd be stripping parts off it and keeping the gold and keeping the palladium and whatever else is on those boards. If I could make it effective, it'd pay my bills pretty well.
Yeah. Well, I think you've made some very valid points, Matt. And I'm sitting here thinking that what would be nice is if they could produce like a blade that could slide across a PCB and take all the surface mount components off in one go. That sort of just slice them off. That would then potentially, and it could be a hot blade, but potentially it would leave you with a raw PCB. And I know that in the past they've guillotined the edge connectors off edge connectors off of boards, melted down and recovering the gold. But you've still got all the muck of the PCB you've got to get rid of, and all the surface mount components. And
sounds like you're onto something there, Martin. You want to patent that idea?
No, not really. But the other thing is, we did recover components years ago, and there were switches and all sorts of bits and pieces. But when you start recovering components off old boards, you need to understand what you're recovering. Because since we were talking about this earlier, I've had another brain thought come to my head, is a lot of transceivers had the PA transistors quite often had beryllium in them. And there's warnings inside, be careful of the PA transistor, don't crack it, because that's horrible stuff. So we don't want to be burying PCBs in the ground. Old PCBs have probably got lead solder on them, and we've done away with lead. We've done away with nickel-cadmium batteries within the last 10 years in the UK. You're not allowed to import those. So I think you're right in putting a reclaim amount of money on it, on an item, so you guarantee that you'll get X back when you take it back to scrap it, and hopefully then it can be scrapped. The item can be scrapped in a sensible way, and we're not just talking about amateur radio. It's anything electronic. It's even down to toasters, washing machines, all those sort of things. Now they're just loaded with electronics, and as we go with the Internet of Things, that's starting to come online quite big now. I think it's only going to get worse, guys.
Oh, absolutely. But let's put in perspective that while in the amateur radio hobby we can see the similar trends, and I'm sure not everyone is willing to recycle anything all the time at this point. It's not our fault per se. It's just we are a reflection of the general issues of society and the way that we consume products. If we're not making it, we're buying it. And so it's really the ownership of that product you buy, whether it's the new sexy, touchscreen rig, SDR rig that everyone thinks is the hottest tool right now for the hobby. Realize that you own it. You'll have, to pass it on, whether it's onto secondhand market or back to the retailer to disassemble it.
Yeah, but a lot of things we buy these days, and we had this discussion, the shiny mobile phone you had last year, when the new model comes out this year just before Christmas, the original phone you had wasn't a bad phone. And do you really need all the functionality of the new device that the marketing people are convincing you should have? How often do you ever use the full functionality of the device? A classic example, and this sounds really silly, when Microsoft brought out Word for Windows version 1, and as a company, the company I work for had it. When they went to the next version, there really wasn't that much that the secretaries and the staff required from the new version, apart from...
They just want to type on it, don't they? They just want to write some letters.
Correct. And pretty much 99% of everything they wanted to do was in the original version of Word, right? All that happened was that support was removed from the old version. So you had to upgrade. And things... I know things get better and improve, and I'm not a Luddite really, as much as Colin thinks I am at times. But I think we sometimes have technology for technology's sake, and we come up with a piece of technology, and then we try and find a solution to fit that technology rather than have a problem and solve the problem with technology. And that's why I think we end up with so much rubbish and so much wastage, because we're forever replacing stuff that doesn't need replacing.
So let's just go back for a moment to a conversation that we've had, and it's a comment that I know Colin made in the past, and it was one we used to do on the other podcast that we used to do, and it's like mobile phones. Done. What else can you put in a mobile phone? Now, I know there are, people talk about, you get a latest screen, you get a better camera, you can get a faster processor, but in reality, your screen's pretty good as it is. You're going to notice that much more difference? Are you going to notice that many more megapixels on your camera? You're just taking up more storage space. What's the one thing that everybody wants with a mobile phone that we don't currently get? That is a battery that lasts a week, like your old Nokia 3310 did. If one mobile phone company could do that, they would have sales more than any other company in the world. I can almost guarantee that. That's what we all want, isn't it? We want a battery that's going to last us for a week. That's the one selling point. Until then, why would you buy a new phone? Because it's got the latest number on it.
But the point is they're working against that situation by adding new features, adding new programs, adding brighter lights, that you don't actually need on a phone, because a smartphone is not a phone. A smartphone is a mini computer with one feature of it is it can make sort of average phone calls. You compare it against what some people might call a feature phone, or the old phones without the smarts in it. And they will always perform better in low signal areas because they're a better phone. But you're right. Adding more and more features. Yeah, and I keep adding more and more features in there, and how much do you need them? I guess recently the only time that there's a justification to upgrade your smartphone is when they added 4G networks.
Yeah, so you've got
so you got
radio
faster.
in there. Yeah, so you've got a different radio in there, but equally, the people that are writing the software, and I'm not just talking about the people that are writing the operating system, be it Android, be it iOS, or whatever. I'm talking about the people that write the apps that go in the software. Well, write them so they don't use as much power. You don't need it to be processing that much data. You can write it like, think back to the days when we were using the internet on a 33.6 dial-up modem, websites weren't as big. Make your app that little bit smaller. How many apps do we use on our phone that are that we need to have that much processing power for? Probably not that many.
And also so much memory, because they sit in memory. They don't.
They just
when
sit
you
there in the
finish
background, don't they?
That's right. When you finish using them, they don't unload, which is a smartphone thing. Common. I think that's probably the operating system that's to blame for that. Whereas on a PC, you close a program and the program closes normally.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing, of course, you mentioned about having 4G or having to buy a new phone to support 4G. Of course, I bet when 5G comes in, that's a whole different set of frequencies, a whole different kind of antenna, a whole different radio inside the phone. In reality, is that not something that you could do in theory? If they put them all on the same frequencies, is it not something you could in theory do in software? Mind you, are the mobile phone manufacturers going to do that? Whoever they are, of course they're not going to. Why? Because they want to sell you a £1,000 phone.
Yeah, and the other point there is if they designed the phone so that the radio board was a separate module that could be exchanged, when the new technology comes along, you keep the phone, you upgrade the radio module. But no, you're talking about phones being around at, £600, £800, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, the last mobile phone I bought was €45, and that was, a fairly recent model. But
again, that's the manufacturers working against us, isn't it?
Yeah,
you talk about this electrical waste. The manufacturers are actively working against it. Why? Shareholders.
Yeah, but then the other thing there is I just coming on to say was with items that cheap, people will go out and buy a new one. If the cheapest phone you could get would be £600 or £700, then people will think twice about spending that every year. If it's 45 or it's built into hidden into a plan, a monthly plan, so you think you're paying a £1 for it, but you're actually
that's my line rental, isn't it? Yeah, that's
after 2 years you've maybe paid £400 or £500 for it, but you don't realise it. Again, it's designed to get people to keep changing from existing working equipment, be it a phone, washing machine, whatever, to sell a new product, because sales and marketing need to make sales.
Yeah,
and that's exactly it. It's whatever the product, whatever the mechanism, the thing it is about. A company that's making something for the purpose of making profit, and to do that, they have to sell the thing they make. Yeah, and that's it.
There should be some kind of legal responsibility to removing the old stuff. Give you an incentive to hand in your old product, whether it's a phone or a television set or whatever. Say, hey, if you hand this in, we're going to give you a big discount. There's your incentive to do it, and then they can recycle it responsibly. Yeah,
and that has been tried to be brought in across Europe for many years now. That the producers that produce in Europe would have that responsibility to take back the old equipment and either recycle it or dispose of it correctly, rather than it just getting dumped into a heap somewhere. Of course,
they do with washing machines, don't they?
The powers that be, the companies that want to make the biggest profit, simply moved their production out of Europe to Asia and got around the law that way.
But I think washing machines and things like that, well, at least when you buy a washing machine, your old one gets taken away. What they do with it, I don't know. They might leave it at the end of the street for all I know. But in theory, it's heading in the right direction.
I think ultimately, though, we can all blame Atari, because they did bury the worst game ever, E.T. in a landfill site.
They denied that, and then they drilled it up and they found a load of them.
So, it started there.
Yeah.
And here endeth the lesson.
Well, I did say this one was going to run for a few whiles, guys, but I think
that's
we're in
Martin
agreement.
Screwing the cap back on.
Yeah. I'm screwing the cap back on now. Yeah, I think we do have a problem with electronic waste or e-waste, which, if we don't legislate against it, is going to just grow and grow and grow. And at some point in time, they'll run out of the rare metals and bits and pieces they need to produce these boards. If they,
Hey, Martin, what happens if you burn e-waste?
I would imagine you'd give off all sorts of toxics.
You'd get e-smog.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you.
And there's your edit point.
Okay. Right. Okay, so we'll leave it at that, guys. An interesting discussion. Hope our listeners enjoyed that one. Right, Garrett, let's pop round in the table quick. Ed, what have you been up to since the last time you've been on the podcast?
I have been working very hard on behalf of the World Radio Team Sport Championships, which it'll be exactly a week after this podcast is released, in Wittenberg in Germany. I do a lot of the translating and proofreading for them. All coming along very well. Looks like it's going to be a great... effectively for me up there a week, but for the contestants like 3 or 4 days, where we'll find who the best contest operators in the world are, whether we like contesting or not. It is part of the hobby, and just seeing the organisation and the work that goes on behind such a worldwide event, it blows you away. There's just so many other things you've got to think about, little things and all the rest of it. I'm quite amazed that what is basically a radio club or a group of radio amateurs that got together, maybe half a dozen of them, to organise this from at the end of the last one 4 years ago. The amount of work they've done, the amount of money they've had to raise to pay for it all, it's a major project. Anyway, so that reason it's taken up about 90% of my what free time I have, and the other 10% at Friedrichshafen, I bought myself a magnetic loop antenna, and I've been trying to work out how to actually tune that thing so it works. So that's the only radio bit, if you like. The rest has been a lot of paperwork and translating work.
Right, sounds like you've been very busy, Ed, and let's say that's good fun. Martin, what have you been up to since the last time? And my Alexa has just kicked off in the kitchen. That's really strange, Martin.
Say, no, Alexa, stop.
No.
Unfortunately just stopped everyone's podcast. I apologise for that. So the last time, what have I been doing? Well, we have a chat on C4 FM on System Fusion every morning, which is nice. It's and we do one day a week on analog and 4 days a week on digital, and the difference is astronomical. You can hear analog for further away, but listening through the noise. But when digital is there, it's a lot clearer than analog, that's for sure. I had a couple of chats on D-Star the other day. A couple of listeners actually came up and said hello. Said, I know you. I know your voice. I know your call sign. Unfortunately, I didn't have any means of writing their name or call sign down at the time, so I apologise for that. But hello to any of those listeners that came up and spoke to me. I think on 34B. I may be wrong. But that was on D-Star. I've tidied my shack. Basically, when I moved into this house and we sort of decorated this room, I built my desk, I put all my radios on my desk, I wired them all up, and they've been like that for however long I've lived in the house. And I thought it was about time that I pulled it all apart, cleaned thoroughly behind them, because dust gets behind them and things like that, and you get in there with a vacuum cleaner. So I've done that. Put it all back, slightly different configuration, just allows for a little bit more room on the desk. The far end of my desk was more a junk heap than anything else. So taken the opportunity to utilize that space and get a little bit more space in the middle of my desk for other things and other projects that I'm working on. And that's pretty much it at the moment. Not a lot else going on. Yeah, just I've got the SDR playout again. I was listening to one of the features the other day about that and thinking, right, I need to have another play with that. So I've got that out, and I started fiddling with it, and then I got distracted. But it's on my desk with the intention of playing with it a little bit more now.
Sounds good to me. And you do manage to wait to wind people up on a Monday to Thursday morning when we work digital by saying 10-4, good buddy.
Well, we only do that on. It's within the terms of my license, but we only do that on digital. We're not on the network at that point, I don't think.
No. But that's
sorry,
fun.
CQ UK, if it was.
No. You are operating within your license. I know you do it for effect. Matthew, what have you been up to?
Yeah, well, it's been a long time since I've been on the podcast, and that's been a little bit of light HF work, in the backyard with a little dipole, just kind of dialing around when I had the chance. Nothing too important. I worked the practical wireless 2-meter SSB contest 3 or 4 weeks ago with Martin and yourself and a couple of others from the Sutton and Cheam Club, which was great. I'm surprised at how much I enjoy a contest. I'm not a competitive person. I am not a competitive person, but when you get a chance to, have a quick QSO and then QRZ and move on to the next one, it's quite an adrenaline rush. I do enjoy that. And I picked up a 2-meter SSB rig, an old Yaesu FT480. And I think it does need a little bit of TLC. I think it needs a bit of alignment, which because listening to some of the conversations out there, they're not on the frequency they say they are, according to my display. So it needs a bit of TLC. But I'm hoping to get that resolved in a couple of months over the summer. Otherwise, I spent a little bit of time on the Belfast. This was probably two weeks ago or so. And I'm looking forward to doing a bit more volunteering with HMS Belfast in the center of London, sitting on the River Thames. It's a fantastic place to be, and big part of the radio club there is always lends a little bit of excitement to the day. And working with the public, and it keeps me. It means I have to think about Morse code as well. I think if Dan was here on this recording, he would also incentivize me, refresh my enthusiasm for Morse. But the public, when you're on the HMS Belfast and you're giving out Morse code certificates, you really have to kind of remember the code to help the kids get through their names, which they do quite well. So. Other than that, not really related to radio. I've been busy with photography. I'm trying to get my darkroom back together. So that's also been a way that I'm sharing my time in the past couple of weeks.
Right. So it does sound so you've been mega busy as well. Well, I'll just round up what I've been up to. Moving on from what Martin said about recharging his shack. The shack room where my shack was some years ago got ripped out and became a junk room, but we're having it completely stripped out, new ceiling, we're going to have the walls replastered, and then I'll redecorate it, and within about a month I should have a shack back, which I'm really looking forward to, because operating from home has been a little bit difficult. At the moment, I only have a handy talkie, so that's a bit of a strange one. We did manage last weekend to put up a 16-metre mast at the Scout Hall, so the guys are quite excited about that. We got a 16-metre pump-up mast, which the club's bought, and the Scouts have allowed us to fit it to the wall at their HQ, and we did some repairs of a couple of other antennas they had up there, so that's quite good. My 2 students took their exam Monday night. One passed, unfortunately the other one didn't, which is a real shame, but I know that she's thinking of retaking it fairly soon. My FTDM 100, my Yaesu digital fusion radio, I don't know if I mentioned last time, I did a very silly thing. I got into a silly state, thought I won't bother to read the manual. I've saved a backup of the configuration. I'll just write the configuration back. And it all wrote back quite nicely, but I had no audio. And I spent ages, and one thing and another, factory reset, the audio was there. So I knew it was a programming issue. Spent ages on it, and on Monday night, while the guys were doing their exam, Carl and myself were out in the car park fiddling with my radio, and just as I found what it was on the keypad of the radio, Carl read it to me off the internet, and it was I'd already checked the internet, but it turns out that the FTDM 100, if you mute the audio in the APRS, if you took in APRS configuration, if you mute the audio, it mutes the audio for the whole radio. So when you come out of APRS, you've got no audio at all, which took a while to suss. And one other thing is with that radio, if you mount it like I have, where you've got the head unit in the front of the car and the back of the radio in the boot or the trunk, a little bit awkward because you can't be both ends at the same time. So I've ordered myself a 5-meter USB cable to plug into the programming cable so I can have my laptop at the front of the car where I'm pushing buttons, and I can also use the laptop and the head unit at the same time. So the USB one with long lead may be very useful to me. And one last thing, I don't know if this can be classed as a proper QSO, but at least I'm well underway now. Chris and I have spent a long time playing with the satellites and getting nowhere very quickly. We now realise one of the things we've been doing wrong, so that was sorted. But on Friday, last Friday, I actually got heard on AO91, a German amateur DL6ER responded with my call sign. So my apologies, I don't think it was a full QSO, but DL6ER did respond with my call sign. So I have been heard on a satellite, so almost a satellite QSO. So that's what I've been up to. So I think
congratulations.
Well,
yeah,
fine.
Congratulations, Martin. Was that with an antenna in your hand outside in the car park, or where did you do the QSO over the satellite, or the transmission to the satellite?
Well, I actually did it in my back garden, or as our American cousins would say, our backyard. I live in a bit of a bowl, so it's not very good for radio where I live. And if the satellites are not more than about 45 degrees to the horizon, they have to be above 45 degrees above the horizon before I can even start to see them. But once it was up high enough, I did get a quick shout through it, and as I say, did get somebody come back with my call sign, so I was quite pleased about that. But I only had a minute or so before it dropped down the other side behind houses and trees and all those sort of things.
So you were following it across the sky with the antenna?
Yeah, I was using an elk antenna.
Yep.
I was using an FT817, which obviously not full duplex, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. But 817 and an elk antenna in my hand. I really should have had a voice recorder running because I have no proof apart from the fact of my word. But satellites, there's a lot going on that pass because you've done it, Ed. But you've got an antenna you're waving around in your hand. You're trying to change frequency. You're trying to use the microphone to call, and all these sort of things. There's a lot going on for a very short period, and but it worked.
This was an FM satellite as well, right?
Yeah. We'll start with the easy ones, Ed.
It's even more difficult if you try and do it with a linear one with sideband. Just something that the other Martin said reminded me something else I've been doing during the last month since the last show. I'm still trying to learn the ins and outs of DMR. So if anybody wants to read the continuing saga, I've got a DMR page up where I'm documenting things as I find them. And that's at tinyurl.com/dd5lp-DMR. And I update that as I learn something new. And quite often I'll go a couple of days later and correct what I put in there because I found something else out different that I didn't know. So still very much in a learning curve in the digital voice area.
Yeah, well, on the last podcast, Bill cursed you for telling him about DMR and your tiny URL site, and he's got the same radio as you now. He says it's all your fault. You've got him off on DMR.
Yeah, I know he's contacted me, so and it was nice that he thanked me on the show as well. But that's what we do in amateur radio. We learn something, we pass it on.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I've found a few things out with my trying to get onto the satellites, and there's lots of people who've written things What I'm intending to do is I'll do something to do with satellites, and I'll correct some of the mistakes that are on the internet that I fell into, some of the traps I fell into. But hopefully for the next person it might make it a little bit easier. It wasn't too difficult, but the easier it becomes, the better it is for people. So, all in all, I think we've been very, very busy. So, I'd like to thank the three of you. I'd like to thank Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Very welcome as always.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. I'd like to thank Mr. Martin Rothwell M0SGL.
Great fun as always.
Yeah, we got great fun to have you. And Mr. Martin Rothwell M0SGL.
Oh, many thanks, and take care.
Yeah, 73 all.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. And we start with a news story here sent in to me by Stefan, 2E0 Victor Kilo Mike, who lets us know about the British Inland Waterways on the Air event, which takes place on the UK Bank Holiday weekend of the 25th to the 27th of August. Open to all amateurs that use inland waterways, canal, towpaths, rivers, marinas, lakes and reservoirs that are used for recreational use. So there's a link to register your location on the ICQ podcast website, and hopefully you'll enjoy the event. Thanks a lot, Stefan, for letting us know about this. We have a news here of a EURAO parties interactive tool, which has been released. It's a database available online, accessible via any device with internet-enabled capabilities, where you can select a band, mode or application, and you can basically consult it for immediate response of activities that are happening throughout Europe. So again, we've got a link to this on the ICQ podcast website page, and hopefully, as I say, that'll be of use to you when operating throughout Europe. And a note just to let you know that next week, the World Radiosport Team Championship takes place in Germany. We were talking there to the organisers in Friedrichshafen, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa has an interview which is available on YouTube or on the ICQ podcast website. It'll be taking place from Thursday the 12th to Monday the 16th. It's an invitation-only event, pitting the world's elite contesters against each other in two-person teams, using a level playing field. So they're using similar stations, similar antennas, etc. And they're all going to be operating in a relatively small geographical area to ensure no one is aided or disadvantaged by local propagation conditions. So obviously, great opportunity there for contesters, the best contesters in the world there. And if you'd like to keep up to date what's going on in the event, their website is wrtc2018.de. So good luck to all those taking part in this week's, or next week, should say, World Radiosport Team Championship. Well, now we head over to our feature in this episode, which is a feature on network radio. I hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Well, hi guys, I'm lucky enough to be interviewing Ian Abel, G3ZHI, who sent us an email, wished to tell us about a new product he's been working on for some time. But Ian, before we start, welcome to the ICQ podcast.
Thank you.
And I wonder, can you give us just a quick bio background of yourself? Because being a G3, you must have seen a fair bit happen in the last few years.
Yes, that's right. I've been involved in amateur radio over 60 years. Sounds a long time. And, of course, the hobby continues to change throughout my journey within the hobby. And I've seen it go through various periods. And I've always been interested in the technology and the new technology of amateur radio. What's the next big thing? And as a consequence, I remember the old days, and I now remember I'm aware of where we are today. And I think it's very important within amateur radio to be continuing looking at the future. I enjoy using VoIP in particular. I was responsible for obtaining the VoIP permission 20 years ago or so off David Hendon, who was then the head of the RA. I met him in Rotherham at a meeting, and he agreed to look at VoIP. We started to do it using the iPhone system, where we did it manually. That's how VoIP started. And I've traveled all over the world, enjoyed amateur radio in different countries, and of course back in the day we had no VoIP. So when that came along, it was a way of enjoying the hobby like I like to do. I do cycling, I do walking, use a local repeater here in the village, and it's connected on the internet to Echolink and IRLP. To move it onto what this project's all about, which is Zello. Zello is a PTT platform that works on all internet platforms for the computers. So you can run it on your Apple, you can run it on your Windows machine and Linux. So it's available. And what's happened is we then use that to connect up to one of the Zello channels. We have 3 Zello active channels on network radio. Anybody is welcome to join, and at least I would recommend everybody trying it and see what they think to it. The contacts that are on it are in amateur radio format, so we do use call signs. The people who haven't got call signs can just join in the contacts, and it's an ideal training tool for radio clubs, because you can create your own Zello channel, and you can bring people in on it, or you can join in our chats. We have between 50 and 70 at the moment people on the channel at any one time, and we class it as a community of like-minded people. It is moderated, so it is a safe space, and the idea is that what we're trying to do is encourage people to get confident in chatting. One of the big problems and challenges that the hobby face is that people, while passing the license, don't then come on the radio after they've passed it. This is a serious issue, and what we are trying to do by using the Zello program tool is change that. So it's a question of using something that's out there and available to increase people's confidence who are newly licensed. Plus it allows amateurs who are licensed anyway to talk to each other, which of course we all know they like to do that. Zello, if you're out in the field, works on the telephone network, the cellular network. So if you're on a device, maybe you've got a mobile phone, you can put Zello on your mobile phone, and then you can use it as an app. You then use it as a data format, or you can use it on a Wi-Fi network if you're out and about traveling. You can only take it around the world on your device. So that means if you're in a country that doesn't allow amateur radio, you can get on your device, you get on the Zello network, and then you're in and you contact, you may be on a ship, enjoy maritime mobile, on a cruise, world cruise, and then you can operate using the ship's Wi-Fi if you've got your data package on the Wi-Fi. What this allows you to do is come into our room if you want to on the network radio side. Network radio was started about 6 months ago by Carl, G1YPQ, and since then it's really grown, and we've got various articles published in the magazines, and there's an item on it on the Southgate website that tells you all about how to use it, what it is, about the Facebook group, and what the channel's all about. As a tool for helping newcomers, it's excellent because they come in, they chat, they get used to talking, and hopefully they then go on to take an amateur radio license out if they want to. There's no pressure, and they can then maybe come back onto the radio. At the moment, one of the biggest problems of amateur radio is the fact that the repeaters on the UHF and VHF bands are underused. A lot of people have deserted them because unfortunately Ofcom has not been able to provide the policing service that it might have done because of the lack of staff and the lack of resources. We all know about that. And because of that, amateur radio itself out there can sometimes be not a safe space with the problems that other people bring into it. Our network radio rooms are all moderated by moderators, and we're able to prevent within seconds any difficulties that may arise on the channel. We've been quite lucky actually, because most people don't cause any problems. However, should they do that, then because it's not radio, and it's done over the internet, and the program allows moderation, then we can moderate them, and by moderate them, you terminate their service. So that's what happens. On the link side, we also use TeamSpeak. So TeamSpeak is another program that you can use. I will say this, that it's not only a non-RF system. There are RF links out there that operate on Zello and TeamSpeak, but they are, of course, only available to radio amateurs. And if you're a licensed radio amateur, you can then go on the channels that allow RF links. So they do go out on RF, and you can use them in the same way that you would use all the other systems, link into Echolink, DMR, D-Star, Fusion, and all the others that are available. These are interesting times, really, and if you're sort of aware of if you're interested in VoIP and you like chatting, a lot of people, what they've said about Zello is it reminds them of the early days of Top Band, because we have laid back, nice long contacts, and we chat, and in a way, it's about the amateur radio community. We like to think of it as a cafe, where we've got maybe 60 or 70 people in a room, all interested in radio and all making conversation. Some are listening, of course, and some don't talk. They'd like to listen, so that also is available. As an example of how useful it can be, I have spoken to a friend of mine who was driving from London to up here in the north. He lived in Wakefield, actually, and we maintained contact throughout the whole of that journey, which lasted about 3.5 hours, and we just chatted away as though he was on 2 meters locally, because that's what Zello allows you to do. He's on the cellular network, and you can have these nice long contacts. You're not worried about RF and repeaters, because it's working over cellular, so that then is not an issue. And there is also articles out there in the various magazines. There's been an article, 7 pages, in the July edition of Practical Wireless, which Donna's published. There's an article in this month's Radcom all about I think it's the A320 that is reviewing on the radio side, or the walkie-talkie side. If you want to, you can buy walkie-talkies, which are network radios, which you then are very similar to a regular radio. They look like a walkie-talkie, but they have a cellular cell card phone in them, cell card in them, and you put that in, and then what that allows you to do is to connect to the cellular network, and they have a PTT button on them, so you can use them like a regular radio that you'd know. These are network radios. If you Google network radios, they come from China, and they are available to use on RF, on the cellular network. Network radios were designed to operate in the commercial world, and what happens is, if you've got a business that requires employees to have a common radio network, which is so they can all talk to each other, that's what they employ. Now, what's happened is, as radio amateurs, we now have incorporated that into our hobby, and we are using them, the network radio side. And there's new radios coming out all the time, and there's various websites which are selling network radios and all the different models. So all that information is available on the Google if you go and have a look. If you're interested in purchasing a network radio, which is a dedicated radio. Some people have said to me, well, why would I need to do that if I've got a cell phone and I can put the app on the phone? The answer to that is that some people like the two devices separate, because if your phone rings and you're in a QSO, it can cause complications because you've got to deal with that. Whereas if you've got a dedicated device, you can tell people to stand by, and then you can take the call on the mobile. So people do like the two devices. The popularity of it is increasing, and people are getting to hear about it, and therefore it's spreading. Now, you may have questions on it. If you do have questions, you can always email me. My email address is g3zhi@hotmail.com. I'm happy to answer any questions, or better still, if you join our network radio channel, once you are trusted, because everybody has to be trusted that comes into the room or on the channel. If you do a search on network radios space CH space 01, that's our main channel, then you're just welcome to join in and join the chat, experience it and see what you think to it. But so far it's proving to be very popular, and it's another aspect of what we need, what we can be using to try in the longer term to encourage people to come into the hobby, to enjoy the conversation and get something out of it without being licensed in the beginning. It's quite revolutionary, really, for people to be able to talk to radio amateurs over a system and do that. And as I've said, if any radio clubs then want to set up their own channels dedicated to their own radio club and the club members, it's very private, because you'd permit people to come in who you are club members only, and then you can set up your own channels where you can enjoy that experience of getting them into talking from their own environment and what it's like to be on the air. I think this builds confidence, and I think it's very important to do that. Hopefully, in the longer term, to encourage people then to come on the radio, and that's the bottom line at the end of the day, to get more people out there active and on the radio, especially on the 2 meters and 70 centimeters, where the bands have gone very, very, well, they've gone dark, haven't they? They've gone very quiet for the reasons that we all know about. And it's important when you start to think about and look at the future. I mean, I've been around a long time, and for the future of the hobby, really, yes, you can go on HF, and there's other aspects of the hobby. There's many aspects of the hobby that you can enjoy. But some of the newer things that are coming in are very short duration contacts, FT8 and all the rest of it, contests. And this is aimed at trying to get people chatting and experiencing radio how it used to be, the old ways of explaining things and taking time with people, and do it and giving them time and doing all that. And this isn't a contest situation where each QSO may only take a couple of seconds. People waffle like they used to do in the old days.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said, Ian. And in fairness, from my point of view, before the Not Real Radio Brigade strike, I'm going to just put another couple of options into the pot that Ian spoke to me.
Ask me some difficult questions.
No. I think I don't think so much the difficult questions. I see a couple of applications here. One you told me about earlier, which was for training purposes, getting people who are mic shy into having conversations. I think that's
it's important that they're doing it by themselves from home.
Yeah, and
that's important.
Yeah, and number two, and I'm working in a nursing home at the moment. Now, this is me personally, Martin, saying this, nothing to do with the nursing home I work for. But there are a lot of people there that are very lonely, and people need social interaction. We're social animals. And if this is a way of, if it's a way of getting to talk to other amateurs, if you are sort of in a nursing home or a shelter accommodation, or you can't put up antennas, this is a great way of being able to continue your hobby, albeit maybe a short term, even if you're in a hospital. You know, this is a way of continuing your hobby.
Wait a bit. That's already been done, because we've had a friend who's had a hip replacement and he operated from his bed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the ideal. It's an ideal thing. And before anybody kicks off on it, you're either using the Wi-Fi, local Wi-Fi to communicate, or you're using the cellular network. Both of those are radio. So what's the argument?
This is sort of a key point. What is the difference between people using a hotspot in a house, which is connected to the internet, which they're using over RF, maybe by a couple of feet? Are you familiar? Have you got a hotspot?
No, I haven't, but I'm familiar. I made one once, and the donor radio, the only donor radio it worked with, it was an FT817, and I thought that was a bit of an overkill to donate my 817 to be the hotspot radio.
Well, if you've got a hotspot radio that's working over a couple of feet on RF, and then it goes out on the internet, you know, are we really saying that a couple of feet on RF makes the difference between something that people will attack and something that people let by? I mean, is that what we've come to? Is that where we are?
I think there will always be people who pick the fight, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before. There was another G3 I knew for a short period of his life before he became a silent key, and I wished I'd known him a lot longer. But he said to me, Martin, he said, back in the 60s, I was a very naughty boy. And I looked at him and I said, what have you been up to, Dickie? And he said, I was using this new system called SSB when everybody else was on AM. Well, nobody uses AM much today, or they do, but not hardly at all. Everybody's on SSB. Yep. You know, things move on, as you rightly say. Let's
well, that's what I'm trying to get across, really. It's a journey of change, and this just represents a vehicle that allows people to communicate who may be in different and limited circumstances.
And I'm going to summarise as I understand it. Effectively, these network radios are effectively a mobile phone with a PTT switch and a better audio, sort of a tailored audio for voice and with a bit louder audio. And they're quite ruggedly built. But you can use them as a mobile phone. Now, for a youngster that's not got much money, but their mum and dad have bought them a phone, that allows them to download a free app and join in with everybody else. So you're not excluding people. The physical hardware, the physical hardware is like an enhancement to Zello, but Zello is free software effectively.
Correct.
Am I right?
Yeah, that's fine. Carry on.
No. So that's as I understand it. So I think what you're saying is Zello can be a very, very useful device, and your network system can be a very, very useful device for people to get on, get talking, float ideas, as you say, talk to people when they're out of the country, people that are stuck in hospitals, nursing homes, those sort of things for periods of time. Great idea. I have no problems with it. It's good. So
and I do agree with what you'd said about that. And I think it is important that it allows people to use radios or to use communication devices from different circumstances, or who are in different circumstances, whether it be an old people's home or, like you've already said, a hospital and things. And it opens up a lot of opportunities. The key here is to get it across that they can do it and it's available, and they can easily put it on the phone. Some amateurs have never heard of it, so it's just a question of more information out there, and it allows people to make that choice.
Yeah. So I'd like to thank Ian for coming along and telling us all about network radio and in Zello program in particular. Ian, if somebody would like to get hold of you, do you have an email address if they'd like to contact you?
Yeah, okay, Martin. My email address is Golf 3 Zulu Hotel India at hotmail.com. G3ZHI at hotmail.com. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions or queries about network radio.
That's great. Okay then, well thank you very much for your time, Ian, and I'll say 73.
Okay then, I'm good on QRZ, by the way, and I do have a website on qsl.net, and the picture on the QRZ is me riding a bicycle while I'm operating on the radio. So there you go. Okay, bye.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian, and we'll catch you soon.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, everybody, I really hope that you enjoyed our feature on network radio. They're certainly very interesting, and this new mode of communication certainly is already getting lots of traction we're hearing already. So hopefully there's something for you guys to pick up on. Drop us a line and let us know what you think. Talking about dropping a line, we've been working our way through a little bit of the feedback we've had over the last few weeks. Obviously, been away at Ham Radio 2018, so we've got this one we want to pick up on first from Donald Glover, KC9 Victor Mike Yankee. A bit of a long one here, but it's certainly full of lots of good information. And it says, he writes in saying, Dan and the ICQ podcast team. Basically, he was in his backyard grilling some meat on a fine barbecue for Memorial Day bank holiday, listening to the show, and was greatly interested by the comments of the presenters on the topic of is the internet and FT8 killing amateur radio. It seems this mantra keeps coming around, and I can't remember who made the comment, but it seems with every decade there is some technology that is going to kill the hobby we hold so dear. I believe that to be true, as with all things, nothing remains the same. However, I think there is something to explore here as to why this technological and very useful hobby seems to have a very old and disappearing demographic. I don't think this is restricted to ham radio, though I don't know of anybody who might have explored this. I was at a workshop where ST Microsystems was demonstrating the latest ARM processors, BLE and motor controllers. And I looked around the room and there were about 5 people less than 45. There were only 2 women and one of those was black. But had I not known this was an ST Micro presentation, I would have thought I was at any of the ham clubs I have attended. I'm pretty sure the only reason there was no one over the age of 65 as because this was an industrial presentation, those people would have retired. I wonder if there isn't really a larger problem. While the world of front-end web development, back-end databases and gaming development has made some significant inroads in the wider demographic, the world of what used to be called real-time systems still hasn't caught up. Now possibly amateur radio is being caught under the same umbrella. It is possible, I thought, that maybe the reason that all the ham radio clubs and events were mostly populated by older white males isn't just a problem with the ham radio clubs, it's a problem with any technology or endeavour that is in the overlapping between the deeply theoretical sciences and the physical engineering. I tell you what, you need a glass of water when you read long ones like this, Dad. Strikes me as we might have a problem if the entire population of embedded developers and process control engines is aging out. It goes on to say he's not sure if his sample is necessarily endemic, but obviously it's something to think about as maybe emphasising the STEM education in the States and wonders what impact this might have. I think, Donald, Dad, I think has some interesting thoughts here, doesn't he? Because as much as we keep talking about, youth and women, etc., coming to the hobby, is this just a problem with the maturing hobby like amateur radio? And if we don't embrace new technologies like, I say, network radio you were just been speaking about, and FT8, etc., then it's too easy for the hobby to die out because everybody, younger people don't think it's cool or etc. From there. I know this is a conversation that seems to come around quite regularly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does, Colin. And in fairness, I think it's, we need a fun factor. And I think summing up the network radio thing, is it real radio? Yes, because it involves either cellular or Wi-Fi. Is it fun? Yes, there is a large amount of fun on it. Is it useful? Yes. Is it amateur radio? Well, yes and no. If it was Zello, no, because it's no RF. If there's RF involved via Echo Link or something like that, it certainly could be. And I think the thing is that, we have to diversify as much as possible. And there is a lot of things in this hobby that excite various people. And there are a lot of amateurs at the Sutton and Cheam Club that have got quite excited about network radio in the last couple of weeks. My mobile phone, which has a Zello app, I'm getting like 4 or 5 calls a week directly to my phone from people calling me because they want to have a chat with me on Zello. So, that's without going into the talk channels. So I think there's lots of things, and I think you have to have passionate people. You have to make things fun. And if you make things fun and the person showing you is passionate about it, then we will attract youngsters. We will attract older people. We should attract everybody. I'm all for attracting the youngsters. That's great. But also the young at heart. And, yeah, if ladies want to get interested, more than willing to involve them in the hobby. Colin,
exactly. I think one of the big things I took from Ham Radio 2018 in the Friedrichshafen was that my senior harmonic helped us out, did a fantastic job and helped us out with production work over the weekend. But interestingly, didn't seem to understand what the hobby was about, even though he was technically immersed in it for 3 days. And I think that probably is one of the biggest pieces of feedback I give to anybody that's trying to bring people into hobby, young, old, ethnic minorities, etc., wherever you want to reach to is if we can't clearly, quickly define what we're trying to achieve, we're never going to bring new people into the hobby, no matter what their age is. And there's an example, a 60-year-old guy, intelligent, in the amateur radio environment for 3 days. And he said all he knows is that everything's named with lots of weird names and numbers and letters. And there's too many acronyms, and he couldn't work out what was going on.
I think he probably needed to be taken aside and told a bit more, Colin. Equally, this is another reason why things like network radio would help, because you can't. Amateur radio is one of the few things, until we had the foundation license in the UK, it was one of the few things where you couldn't do it until you had a license. You had to pass your test before you could go on air and practice. Now, albeit foundation license holders, once they're on a course, they can operate under supervision for up to a year while they're doing their course. But I think possibly it's a matter of just giving him a bit of a high-level overview, and maybe I'll do that when I'm out in September.
He sort of got it, but he still said the same thing. So look, it's feedback. It's feedback, as they say. Well, yeah, I'm sure, guys, this will rumble on and on and on, and certainly send us in your thoughts. You're more than welcome to contact us in the usual ways. ICQpodcast.com website from the contact form. Our Twitter handles at Colin Butler and at M1LRB. You're more than welcome to that there. LinkedIn, the ICQ podcast, Facebook group, etc. Feel free to get in contact with us that way. We'd like to thank Martin, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Matthew, Mike 0 November Juliet X-Ray, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa for joining us on the News Roundtable. Thank you very much for taking part in that there. And what else we got? Oh yeah, please think about us and keep us advert free, please, guys, by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you send our way is always greatly appreciated. I think that about wraps up another show, episode 271. Oh, one thing to mention, guys, it's nearly our 10th birthday. So, as I say, think of us there on the donation side for our 10th birthday. You're more than welcome to help us out with that there. Right, well, I think the only thing left now for me to do is to send you off to that cupboard to find a biscuit and a cup of tea for Mrs. B.
Certainly will, Colin. She'll be in from work shortly, so we'll go from there. I'll catch you soon. 73.
73, so bye-bye.